From our Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana, Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. A man convicted of killing over 20 people and injuring more than 20 others at a Walmart in Texas 4 years ago has been sentenced to 90 consecutive life terms. It was one of the deadliest attacks on Latinos in recent U.S. history. 24-year-old Patrick Crusius pleaded guilty in February. Prosecutors say Crusius committed the rampage with the sole intent of killing Mexicans and immigrants. In an online post immediately before the massacre, he reportedly professed his xenophobic and white supremacist beliefs. Crusius also faces a death penalty in another murder case in which he has pleaded not guilty. An 86-year-old man was shot in New York City while on his way to pray at a local mosque. The shooter, identified as 25-year-old Thomas Abreu, is in custody. The shooting occurred Saturday morning in the Richmond Hill neighborhood of Queens. The victim, Hamad Ali Saidi, was pronounced dead at the scene. Saidi's son, Ahmed al-Saidi, says his father's daily routine was to go for a walk before visiting a local park and then going to the mosque. He had emigrated to America from Yemen in 1962 and was scheduled to visit the country next week with his family. The suspect also shot at 3 other people at separate locations. Authorities say Abreu was riding a moped when he fired on the victims. He has been charged with murder, attempted murder, and weapons possession. Experts say Republicans' lawsuits against disinformation researchers may be affecting their ability to speak ahead of the 2024 elections. Republicans have also put pressure on researchers through a House subcommittee investigation. They allege that major technology platforms unfairly target conservative votes. But research has produced little evidence to support these claims. The right-wing narrative of censorship by the tech industry gained momentum when the platforms began cracking down on misinformation related to COVID-19. In one case, conservatives targeted a researcher who had been appointed by the Department of Homeland Security to serve on a disinformation panel. She received death threats, was a target of deepfake pornography, and had her personal information published online. The Republicans' House subcommittee investigating what it calls the weaponization of the federal government. It has issued subpoenas and requested information from various universities that conduct disinformation research. Former CNN reporter Saima Mohsen is suing the network for alleged unfair dismissal and racial discrimination. Mohsen was incapacitated after an accident while reporting from Jerusalem in 2014. She claims CNN did not support her after the incident. Mohsen also alleges she was denied high-profile broadcast slots because of her race and disability. The British-Pakistani journalist also alleges that she was paid less than her white male counterparts. CNN denies the allegations. The case will be heard in London next Monday. Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has criticized President Joe Biden for calling out Jewish settlement construction in the occupied West Bank. Biden said in a CNN interview on Saturday that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government has some of the most extreme members he has seen in Israel. Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich are staunch supporters of Israeli settlement expansion in the West Bank. Under international law, all Jewish settlements in Israeli-occupied territories are illegal. Ben-Gvir has repeatedly advocated for the expansion of Jewish settlements and the establishment of settlement outposts on the hills of the West Bank. Last month, the Israeli government passed a resolution giving Smotrich near total control over planning permits for settlement construction in the West Bank. An estimated 700,000 settlers live in more than 100 settlements and over 100 outposts in the occupied West Bank. Kuwaiti Islamic author and speaker Tariq al-Swaidan has called on the African people to support justice and freedom for Palestinians. He says Africa is the origin of humanity and has an abundance of natural resources. Al-Swaidan also stressed that Africans can play an important role in the Palestinian cause, financially and through media presence. Al-Swaidan stressed the Arab world is not divided on the Palestinian issue, though some leaders are normalizing relations with Israel. The scholar says Israel has established close relations with many African countries to counter the isolation and hostility of its Arab neighbors. But Israel remains excluded from the African Union. A majority of the 54 African countries vote for Palestine in the UN General Assembly. Muslims and Jews commemorate the Srebrenica Massacre in Bosnia together. More details after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Muslims and Jews gathered in Bosnia to commemorate the 28th anniversary of the Srebrenica Massacre this week. More than 8,000 Bosniak, mainly Muslim men and boys, were killed in Srebrenica in July 1995. This was after Bosnian Serb forces overran the eastern town, which was supposed to be a UN-protected refuge during the civil war in the country. The slaughter was classified as a genocide by 2 UN tribunals. The remains of the massacre's victims are still being excavated from mass graves and identified through DNA analysis. Serb leaders in Bosnia and neighboring Serbia continue to deny the Srebrenica genocide. Menachem Rosensaft, General Counsel of the World Jewish Congress, said Jews and Muslims must ensure such atrocities are not repeated. Yemen's Houthi rebels have imposed a ban on Swedish goods in response to the burning of the Quran in the country. Salwan Momika, an Iraq-born refugee, burned a copy of the Quran outside the Stockholm Mosque in Sweden under police protection last month. In January, a far-right Danish politician, Rasmus Paludan, also set fire to a copy of the Quran outside the Turkish embassy in Sweden. Houthi Minister of Industry and Trade Mohammed Sharaf al-Mutahhar says Swedish goods will not be allowed into areas held by the group. He says this is in response to the Swedish government allowing wrongdoers to desecrate the Quran. Al-Mutahhar's department drew up a list of 30 Swedish agencies and 100 brands to be boycotted. The Houthis ousted the Saudi-backed government from the capital Sana'a in late 2014 and currently rule northern Yemen. The number of displaced people in war-torn Yemen has dropped by half in the first 6 months of this year. The International Organization for Migration says over 20,000 people were displaced between January 1st and July 1st. That is down from 42,000 in the same period last year. Yemen has been racked by violence and instability since 2014. That was when Houthi rebels allied with Iran seized much of the country. The 9-year civil war has killed nearly 400,000 Yemenis. De-escalation has recently begun to emerge as the United Nations seeks to resolve the conflict. An Iranian court has sentenced rapper Toomaj Salehi to 6 years in prison. This is for participating in protests criticizing the government last October that erupted following the death of Mahsa Amini. Amini died in police custody. Protests quickly spread nationwide and led to calls for the overthrow of Iran's rulers. Salehi has been critical of the government in his songs and music videos. After his arrest, state media released a video showing him blindfolded and apologizing for his words. Human rights organizations say Iran routinely tortures prisoners into making false confessions. Salehi's supporters fear he could face the death penalty. He has also been barred from leaving Iran for 2 years. Iran has executed 7 people in connection with the protests. A French court has rejected a request to lift the controversial Burkini ban on the beaches of a tourist resort in southern France. The Burkini is an Islamic swimsuit covering the entire body, except for the face, hands, and feet. The Administrative Court of Nice rejected the request of the Human Rights League France to overturn the ban at Mandelieu-la-Napoule. In 2012, the municipality became the first to ban burkinis on beaches. The court says its decision was aimed at preventing a disturbance of public order. Syria has withdrawn the accreditation of 2 local journalists working for the BBC. The Syrian Ministry of Information has accused the BBC of engaging in false and politicized reporting. The BBC says its Arabic news service reports impartially and independently. The move comes amid an increasing crackdown on independent media in Syria. The country ranks 175th out of 180 on a press freedom index compiled by Reporters Without Borders. Experts say the BBC's report on trafficking in the drug Captagon may have been a reason for the journalist's accreditation being revoked. The report alleged the Syrian government was involved in the drug's production and export. Syria has denied any involvement in the Captagon trade. Maher al-Assad, the head of the Syrian army's 4th Division and the president's brother, has been named a key figure in the trade by Western powers. Prominent Afghan citizens have launched a campaign to force the Taliban to allow the reintroduction of girls' education. Fazl Hadi Wazin told Muslim Network TV the campaign has been launched inside and outside of Afghanistan. Wazin is an Islamic scholar, academic, and politician currently living in Turkey. He says the campaign is apolitical and involves a cross-section of citizens, civil society groups, parliamentarians, and others. Wazin says the pursuit of knowledge is a religious duty and a basic human right. He stresses that the campaign will use all means to convince and force the Taliban to reverse its ban on women's education. The scholar is calling on the international community and renowned Islamic scholars to convince the Taliban to rescind the ban. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.